Could you dance with me?
Could you dance with me? Sarah asks a stranger to dance with her just to irritate her ex. What she doesn't expect is the instant chemistry, his fierce protectiveness, or discovering that the mysterious man is Asher Blackwell, the billionaire CEO of the company where she's worked for 3 years and whom no one has ever seen in person. But his most shocking revelation isn't even that, and that's something you'll discover in the story. Chapter 1. Could you dance with me?
Provoke my ex, so why does it feel real? Tell me.
Why does it feel real?
I shouldn't have come. The gala was beautiful in that excessive way wealth always is. Crystal chandeliers throwing prismatic light across marble floors, and designer gowns that cost more than my monthly rent. Champagne flowing like water and conversations that meant absolutely nothing. But none of that mattered because he was here. Marcus, my ex, standing near the bar with that smug smile I used to think was charming. The one that now made my stomach turn and my jaw clench with the memory of every lie he'd told so smoothly. He'd seen me the moment I walked in, his eyes tracking me across the room like a predator who still thought he had claim to his prey. And I hated that I'd let my friend convince me to come. Hated that I was wearing my best dress, just to prove something to a man who didn't deserve the effort. "Sarah," he'd said when he cornered me near the entrance 20 minutes ago, his voice dripping with false concern. "You look different." Translation: you look single. You look like you're struggling. You look like leaving me was the mistake I always said it would be. I'd smiled, cold and polished. "I am different, Marcus. I'm happier." But the truth was more complicated because standing here watching him watch me with that knowing smirk, I felt small and exposed and painfully aware that everyone who knew us was watching this interaction, waiting to see if I'd crumble. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. My eyes scanned the room desperately, looking for an exit or a distraction or literally anything that would get me away from his orbit without looking like I was running. That's when I saw him. Tall, devastatingly handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Dark suit, tailored so perfectly it had to be custom, and he was standing alone near the edge of the dance floor, watching the crowd with an expression of polite boredom that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Something about his posture, the way he held himself with that effortless confidence, made my next decision feel less insane than it probably was. I walked straight up to him before I could overthink it, my heart hammering against my ribs and my hands slightly shaking with adrenaline and desperation. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, the words coming out faster than I intended. "But could you dance with me? My ex is watching, and I really need him to think I've moved on." The man turned to look at me, and I felt the impact of his full attention like a physical force. Dark eyes that seemed to see everything in a single glance, a slight tilt of his head that suggested both amusement and interest. "And have you?" he asked, his voice low and rich with an accent I couldn't quite place. "Moved on. Completely," I lied. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile but was infinitely more dangerous. "Then let's make sure he believes it," he said, and offered his hand. The moment I took it, I knew I'd miscalculated. This wasn't just some stranger willing to help a desperate woman at a gala. This was someone who commanded attention without asking for it. Someone whose touch sent electricity racing up my arm in a way that had nothing to do with fake relationships and everything to do with very real chemistry. He led me onto the dance floor with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times, his hand finding the small of my back while the other held mine with just enough pressure to be both respectful and claiming. And then we were moving. He didn't dance like a normal person, didn't just sway politely to the music and make small talk. He led with absolute certainty, each movement deliberate and controlled and impossibly smooth. I should have been focused on Marcus, on making sure he was watching, on selling the performance, but all I could focus on was the man holding me, the way his hand felt against my back, warm even through the silk of my dress, the way he smelled like cedar and something darker, the way his body moved against mine with a kind of practiced grace that made my breath catch. "Your ex," he murmured, his mouth close enough to my ear that I felt his breath against my skin. "Is he the one staring at us like he wants to commit murder?" I glanced over, and yes, Marcus was staring, his face tight with barely contained fury, and something that might have been jealousy. "That's him," I confirmed, trying to ignore the way my pulse jumped at our proximity. "Good," my stranger said, and pulled me infinitesimally closer. "Then let's give him something to really hate." His hand shifted lower on my back, still appropriate but somehow more possessive, and when I looked up at him, I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach flip. He wasn't just helping me anymore. He was enjoying this, and God help me, so was I. Chapter 2. First Impact.
Si esto es solo un acto,
¿Por qué no te estás alejando?
The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and I should have pulled away, Should have thanked him and gone back to pretending I was having a good time at this insufferable gala, but his hand tightened slightly on my back, a silent request to stay, and my body answered before my brain could intervene. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear it over the music. "Sarah, Sarah," he repeated, like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. Don't," I interrupted, surprising myself. "Don't tell me yet. I need this to be simple for a moment." Something flickered in his expression, understanding mixed with something darker. "Simple," he said, and there was amusement in his voice now. "I can do simple, but nothing about the way we were moving felt simple. Nothing about the heat building between our bodies or the way my heart was racing felt remotely uncomplicated." "He's still watching," my stranger murmured after a moment, "and he looks like he's debating whether to interrupt us or set something on fire." I couldn't help it. I laughed and felt his chest rumble against mine with what might have been approval. "That's Marcus for you," I said. "Always needing to be the center of attention. Always needing to control the narrative. Is that why you left him?" The question was casual, but I heard the edge beneath it, the genuine curiosity. "Part of it," I admitted. "Mostly I left because I realized he saw me as an accessory, something pretty to have on his arm that made him look good without actually requiring him to see me as a person." His hand moved on my back, a subtle stroke that felt both comforting and dangerous. "Then he's an idiot," he said simply. "You don't even know me." "I know you had the courage to walk up to a complete stranger and ask for help," he replied. "I know you're more concerned with your ex thinking you're happy than actually being happy, which means you're still letting him have power over you." The observation stung because it was accurate, and I stiffened in his arms, ready to pull away, but he held me there, gentle but firm. "I'm not judging," he continued, his voice softer now. "I'm just observing that a woman who looks like you, who carries herself with the kind of quiet strength you have, shouldn't need to prove anything to anyone." I looked up at him then, really looked at him and saw something in his dark eyes that made my breath catch. Not pity or condescension, but genuine interest, like he actually wanted to understand. "Now, who are you?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. He smiled, slow and devastating. "Someone who's very glad you asked me to dance." The response should have annoyed me, the non-answer wrapped in charm, but instead I found myself smiling back despite everything. "And that's not an answer." "No," he agreed, "but it's the truth. I haven't enjoyed myself at one of these things in years, and here you are, making the entire evening worthwhile in under 10 minutes. "Smooth," I said, trying to inject sarcasm into my voice even as warmth spread through my chest. "Honest," he corrected, and the way he said it made me believe him. The song was ending, but neither of us stopped moving, and I realized with startling clarity that I didn't want this to end. Didn't want to go back to standing alone while Marcus watched and judged and reminded me of everything I'd lost. "Your ex is approaching," my stranger said suddenly, his body shifting slightly so he was between Marcus and me. "Would you like me to handle this, or would you prefer to do it yourself?" The protective gesture should have irritated me, should have triggered my independent streak that hated being treated like I needed saving. But something about the way he offered, giving me the choice rather than assuming, made my defenses crack just a little. "Handle it how?" I asked, curious despite myself. His smile turned dangerous. "By making it very clear that you're not available." "But I am available," I pointed out. "This is fake. Remember? You're just helping me save face." He looked down at me then, and there was something in his expression that made my pulse jump. Something hungry and possessive, and completely at odds with the respectful way he'd been touching me. "Is it?" he asked softly, because it stopped feeling fake to me about 3 minutes ago. Before I could process that, before I could even begin to formulate a response, Marcus was there. "Sarah," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" My stranger's hand tightened imperceptibly on my waist. "The lady is occupied," he said, his tone perfectly polite, but with an edge of steel underneath that made Marcus's eyes narrow. "And you are?" "Someone she actually wants to dance with," my stranger replied smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we were in the middle of something." And then he spun me away, leaving Marcus standing there with his mouth open and fury radiating from every line of his body. I should have felt guilty. I felt victorious instead. Chapter 3. The Forbidden Connection.
Trust me. Some people don't know how to hear no.
We didn't stop dancing even after Marcus retreated, his face tight with humiliation and rage, and I knew I'd pay for that moment of victory later. Knew he'd find some way to make me regret embarrassing him in front of everyone. But right now, wrapped in the arms of a stranger whose name I still didn't know, I couldn't bring myself to care. "That was unnecessarily cruel," I said, though I was smiling. "Was it?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Because from where I'm standing, he deserved far worse for the way he looked at you. You don't even know what happened between us." "I know enough," he said, his hand shifting on my back in a way that sent heat racing down my spine. I know he made you feel small, and I know you're still carrying that weight even though you shouldn't be. The observation was too accurate, too close to the truth I'd been avoiding, and I found myself looking away, suddenly uncomfortable with how easily he seemed to read me. You're very observant for someone who just met me 10 minutes ago. 15, he corrected with a slight smile. And I'm observant because you're worth observing. My heart did something stupid in my chest, and I forced myself to focus on the music, on the movement of our bodies, on anything except the dangerous warmth spreading through me. I should probably let you go, I said, though I made no move to pull away. You've done your good deed for the evening, rescued the damsel in distress from her awful ex. Is that what I did? He asked, and there was something darker in his voice now, because it felt more like I found the most interesting person at this entire insufferable event, and convinced her to stay in my arms for as long as she'd let me. I looked up at him then, searching his face for signs of manipulation or charm or any of the games Marcus used to play, but all I saw was honesty, raw and unfiltered and completely disarming. You don't know anything about me, I protested weakly. Then tell me, he said. What keeps you up at night? What makes you laugh? What do you do when you're not saving face at galas you clearly don't want to attend? The questions caught me off guard, because they weren't the usual small talk, weren't about my job or my interests or any of the surface-level things people asked when they didn't actually care about the answer. I work too much, I admitted, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. I stay late at the office because going home to an empty apartment reminds me that I'm alone, and I read romance novels at 2 a.m. because at least fictional men know how to communicate. He laughed, a real, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. Fictional men have an unfair advantage, he said. We real ones have to figure it out as we go. The music ended, but he didn't release me, instead guiding me smoothly off the dance floor toward the bar where fewer people congregated, and the lighting was softer, more intimate. What can I get you? He asked, positioning himself between me and the rest of the room in a way that felt protective without being possessive. Something strong, I said. Tonight has been more eventful than I planned. He ordered us both whiskey, expensive and smooth, and when the bartender called him sir, with a deference that seemed excessive, I filed it away as curious but not important. We moved to a quieter corner, away from the main event, and I became acutely aware that we were more alone now, that the buffer of other people had disappeared, and it was just us in this small pocket of space. And you're staring, I said, taking a sip of whiskey that burned pleasantly down my throat. I am, he agreed without apology. You're interesting to look at. That's forward. Would you prefer I lie and pretend I'm not completely fascinated by you? The honesty should have felt like too much, should have triggered all my warning bells about men who came on too strong. But there was something in the way he said it, matter of fact and unashamed, that made it feel less like a line and more like a simple statement of truth. I don't even know your name, I protested. Does it matter? Shouldn't it? He considered this, taking a slow sip of his drink. Names carry expectations, he said finally. The moment I tell you who I am, everything changes, and I'm enjoying this too much to rush that moment. There was something ominous in the statement, something that suggested his name would mean something, and I felt a flutter of curiosity mixed with apprehension. Before I could press further, Marcus appeared again. Sarah, we need to talk, he said, completely ignoring my companion. Ian, no, I said simply. We don't. It's important. The lady said no. My stranger interrupted, his voice pleasant but with an edge of steel underneath. I'd suggest respecting that. Marcus's face flushed with anger. This doesn't concern you. It does when you're making her uncomfortable, he replied, stepping slightly forward in a way that wasn't threatening, but somehow made Marcus take a step back. Now I'm going to ask you politely to leave before this becomes unpleasant for everyone involved. There was something in his tone, in the way he carried himself, that spoke of authority so ingrained it didn't need to be stated, and I watched Marcus's expression shift from anger to uncertainty to something that looked almost like recognition. Who the hell are you? Marcus demanded. My stranger smiled, cold and dangerous. Someone you don't want to antagonize, he said simply. Now go. And Marcus went, his retreat hasty and humiliated, and I should have felt guilty for the public spectacle. But all I felt was relief and something darker, something that looked a lot like desire for the man standing beside me who'd defended me without being asked, who'd made Marcus back down with nothing but presence and confidence. Thank you, I said softly. He turned to look at me, his expression softening. Don't thank me for doing what any decent person would do. Most people wouldn't, I said. Most people would let me handle it myself or worse, enjoy watching me squirm. Then you've been around the wrong people, he said, moving closer until I could feel the heat of him. And for what it's worth, watching you handle him yourself would have been equally satisfying. The compliment wrapped in respect made something warm unfold in my chest, and I found myself leaning into his orbit, drawn by something I couldn't name and didn't want to resist. "This is crazy," I whispered. "I don't even know you." "No," he agreed, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from my face in a gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. "But you want to, and that's a start." He wasn't wrong. God help me, he wasn't wrong at all. Chapter 4. The Second Impact.
Yuri!
We talked for another hour, tucked away in our corner while the gala continued around us like we existed in a separate world entirely, and I learned things about him that had nothing to do with names or titles. He was funny in an understated way, his humor dry and sharp and unexpected. He asked questions that made me think, made me reveal pieces of myself I usually kept hidden, and when I talked, he listened in a way that suggested he actually cared about the answers. I was laughing at something he'd said, something about the absurdity of caviar as a status symbol, when a man in an expensive suit approached us. "Mr. Blackwell," he said, his tone deferential in a way that made my stomach drop. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but the board members were hoping to speak with you before you leave." Mr. Blackwell. The name hit me like cold water, and I felt my stranger, my mystery man, go still beside me. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said without looking away from me, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made the man nod quickly and retreat. The silence between us was suddenly heavy, weighted with the revelation hanging in the air. "Blackwell," I repeated slowly, my mind racing because that name meant something. That name was important, as in Blackwell Industries. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Guilty. Blackwell Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country, a company so massive it employed thousands of people across dozens of sectors, and the CEO was notoriously private, rarely appearing in public, and never in the society pages. "You're the CEO," I said, and it wasn't a question. "I am," he confirmed, watching my face carefully, "and judging by your expression, you work for me." My heart stopped because yes, I worked for Blackwell Industries, had worked there for 3 years in the marketing department, and I danced with my boss, had let my boss defend me from my ex, had been flirting with my boss for the past 2 hours without having any idea who he was. "I should go," I said, panic rising in my chest. "Sarah?" "No," I interrupted, setting down my glass with shaking hands. "This was a mistake. I didn't know who you were and you should have told me." "I know," he said calmly, infuriatingly calm. "And I didn't tell you, because I wanted you to like me before you knew. Wanted one conversation where someone saw me as a person instead of a position." The honesty in his voice made me pause, made me look at him and see the vulnerability beneath the revelation. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "No," he agreed. "It's not, but it's the truth, and I won't apologize for wanting to know what it felt like to be wanted for myself instead of what I could provide." My chest ached because I understood the loneliness in that admission, understood the weight of always being seen as a title instead of a person. "I work for you," I said, trying to find solid ground in logic. "You work for my company," he corrected. "You don't work directly for me. You've probably never even been in the same building as my office." He wasn't wrong. The executive floors were a different world entirely. I'd never even seen the top floor where the CEO supposedly worked. "This is still inappropriate." "Why?" he challenged. "Because there's a power imbalance. Because people might talk. Because it doesn't fit into the neat professional boxes society demands we stay in." "Yes," I said. "All of that." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell him. Cedar and something darker. "I don't care," he said simply. "I haven't cared about what people think in years, and I'm not going to start now. Not when I finally found someone who makes me feel something real." My breath caught because that was too much, too fast, too honest. "You don't know me. I know enough," he said, his hand coming up to cut my face with a gentleness that made my walls crumble. "I know you're brave and funny and far too kind to ex-boyfriends who don't deserve your attention. I know you read romance novels at 2 in the morning and work too much because being alone scares you. That's not knowing someone," I protested weakly. "That's knowing facts." "Then let me know more," he said, his voice dropping to something intimate and raw. "Come home with me tonight. Let me show you that this isn't just about the dance or the gala or some game I'm playing." I should have said no, should have protected myself from the inevitable complications, but standing there with his hand on my face and his eyes holding mine with an intensity that stole my breath, I found I didn't want to be careful. For once in my carefully controlled life, I wanted to be reckless. "This is insane," I whispered. "Completely," he agreed. "People will talk. Let them. I could lose my job." "You won't," he said firmly. "I promise you that whatever happens between us, your career is protected." I looked at him, searching for manipulation or ulterior motives or any of the red flags I should have been seeing. But all I saw was honesty and desire, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "One night," I said finally, "just to see if this is real or just adrenaline from the evening." He smiled, slow and devastating. "One night," he agreed, "though I should warn you, I have no intention of letting you go after that." And despite every logical thought screaming at me to run, I found myself taking his hand and following him out into the night. Chapter 5. First Night.
Could you dance with me?
His car was exactly what I expected, sleek and expensive and driven by someone else, which gave us privacy in the back seat that felt both intimate and dangerous. We didn't speak during the drive, the silence heavy with anticipation and second thoughts I kept swallowing down, because if I let myself think too hard about what I was doing, I'd ask him to turn around. His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers interlacing in a gesture that felt more intimate than it should have, and when I looked at him, his expression was soft, almost vulnerable. "You can change your mind," he said quietly, "at any point, for any reason. I'll have you driven home with no questions asked and no consequences." The offer should have made me feel better, but instead it made my chest ache because it reminded me that despite the power and the money and the intimidating presence, he was just a man trying to do the right thing. "I know," I said, squeezing his hand. His penthouse was everything I imagined it would be. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums, but I barely noticed any of it because all my attention was on him, on the way he moved through the space with easy familiarity, on the way he looked at me like I was the only thing in the room worth noticing. "A drink?" he offered, moving toward what I assumed was the bar. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want to be completely present for this." Something flared in his eyes, heat and approval and something darker. "Come here," he said softly. And it wasn't a command, but an invitation I found myself accepting without hesitation. I crossed the space between us, my heels clicking on the hardwood, until I was standing close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with a gentleness that made my breath catch. "I've wanted to do this since the moment you walked up to me," he murmured, and then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle, wasn't the tentative exploration of two people getting to know each other. It was hungry and demanding, and absolutely devastating in its intensity. I melted into him, my hands finding his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt, and realizing with startling clarity that he was just as affected as I was, just as overwhelmed by whatever this was building between us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "Tell me this is real," he whispered. "Tell me I'm not alone in feeling like the ground just shifted." "You're not alone," I admitted, my voice barely audible. His smile was brilliant and genuine and made him look younger, less burdened by whatever weight he usually carried. "Good," he said, "because I have no idea what I'm doing here and it's terrifying." The admission surprised me because men like him, powerful men who commanded empires, weren't supposed to be uncertain about anything. "You're not the only one who's terrified," I said. He pulled back slightly, studying my face like he was memorizing every detail. "What are you afraid of?" "That this is too good to be real," I admitted. "That tomorrow I'll wake up and realize I imagined the entire thing, or worse, that it was real, but you'll regret it." His expression softened, something tender and protective crossing his features. "I won't regret this," he said firmly. "I knew I wanted you the moment you asked me to dance. Knew I was in trouble when you smiled at something I said. Knew I was completely lost when you looked at me like I was worth knowing." The honesty in his words undid something in my chest, some last wall I'd been desperately trying to maintain. "Asher," I whispered, using his name for the first time since learning it. "Yes, stop talking," he laughed, the sound warm and genuine. And then he kissed me again, slower this time but no less intense, his hands moving to my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. Time became fluid, minutes or maybe hours passing as we explored this thing between us, as clothing was slowly removed with reverence rather than urgency, as we mapped each other's bodies with careful attention and growing confidence. He was gentle when I needed him to be, demanding when I wanted him to be, attentive in ways I'd never experienced before, and when I finally lay in his arms, skin against skin and hearts beating in synchronized rhythm, I felt something shift fundamentally inside me. This wasn't just physical attraction or adrenaline from the evening. This was connection, real and terrifying, and absolutely undeniable. "Stay," he murmured against my hair, his arms tightening around me like he was afraid I'd disappear. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. "I mean after tonight," he clarified, his voice rough with emotion. "Stay in my life. Let me take you to dinner like I should have done from the beginning. Let me prove that this isn't just about wanting you physically, but about wanting to know every part of you. I turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the dim light filtering through the windows. You fell first, I said, realization dawning. He smiled, rueful and honest. And I fell the moment you said no to me at that party weeks ago, he admitted. I fell watching you move through crowds like you belonged to yourself. I fell when you asked a stranger to dance just to prove a point to an ex who didn't deserve your attention. That was tonight, I pointed out. Was it? He asked, and there was something in his expression that suggested he'd been watching me longer than I realized. Or have I been finding excuses to be at company events where I knew you'd be for months now, hoping you'd finally notice me? The revelation should have scared me, but instead, it made something warm unfold in my chest. That's creepy, I said, but I was smiling. It's honest, he corrected, and I'm done pretending I don't want things I actually want. I kissed him then, soft and slow and full of promise. And somewhere in the distance, the city continued its endless rhythm, completely unaware that 2 lives had just irrevocably changed. Chapter 6. The Revelation.
When everyone finds out, my life will change forever.
I woke up to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a blissful moment, I forgot where I was. Then I felt the warm weight of an arm around my waist and remembered everything. The gala, Marcus, the dance, the revelation, the night that followed. Oh God, the night that followed. I turned my head carefully and found Asher still asleep beside me, his face relaxed in a way I hadn't seen when he was awake, dark hair falling across his forehead and his breathing deep and even. He was beautiful and powerful, and apparently my boss and I'd just spent the night with him like some kind of impulsive romance novel heroine who didn't think about consequences. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I reached for it carefully, trying not to wake him. 7 messages from my friend asking where I disappeared to, 3 emails from work about Monday's presentation, and 1 calendar reminder that made my stomach drop. By Monday 9 a.m., all hands meeting with new CEO. New CEO. My brain stuttered over the words because Blackwell Industries had announced months ago that the elusive founder who never appeared in public would be stepping into a more active role, that he'd be doing quarterly all-hands meetings, that employees would finally get to meet the man behind the empire. I'd been curious about it, had wondered what kind of person built something so massive while remaining completely invisible. And now I knew, because I'd slept with him. Oh my God, I whispered, the full weight of realization hitting me like a freight train. Asher stirred beside me, his arm tightening around my waist as he pulled me closer without fully waking. Too early for existential crises, he murmured against my shoulder, his voice rough with sleep. Asher, the all-hands meeting on Monday, I said, my voice slightly strangled. The one where everyone finally meets the CEO who's been hiding for 3 years. He went still and I felt him wake up properly, awareness flooding back into his body. Ah, he said. Ah, I repeated, turning to face him. Ah, that's all you have to say. He opened his eyes, and despite the gravity of the situation, there was amusement dancing in their dark depths. I was planning to tell you before then, he said reasonably. In when? I demanded, sitting up and clutching the sheet to my chest. When exactly were you planning to mention that in approximately 48 hours I'm going to walk into a conference room and see the man I just slept with standing at the front introducing himself as my boss? Our boss, he corrected. Technically, I'm everyone's boss. That's not helping. He sat up too, running a hand through his hair and looking far too attractive for someone who was about to ruin my entire professional life. Sarah, do you know what people are going to think? I continued, panic rising in my chest. They're going to think I slept my way into some kind of advantage. They're going to think every project I've worked on was because of favoritism. They're going to think I'm some kind of corporate climber who seduced the CEO. No one's going to think that, he said calmly. And everyone's going to think that, I shot back. I've worked at Blackwell for 3 years. 3 years of late nights and presentations and proving myself, and now it's all going to be invalidated because I made one impulsive decision at a gala. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, needing space to process the magnitude of what I'd done. Okay, he said, his voice taking on that executive tone I'd heard him use on the phone once last night. Let's approach this logically. There's nothing logical about this situation. There's always logic, he countered. First, no one except us knows what happened last night. Second, your work speaks for itself regardless of our personal relationship. Third, I've been watching your career progression for months, and you've earned every advancement through merit. Alone, I stopped mid-panic, something in that statement catching my attention. Wait, you've been watching my career progression? He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I may have been paying attention to certain departments more closely than others. Certain departments, I repeated slowly. You mean my department? Possibly? Asher Blackwell, I said, using his full name like a weapon. How long have you been creeping on me professionally? Creeping is such an ugly word, he protested. I prefer strategically observing. How long? He sighed, running a hand over his face. Remember that presentation 6 months ago about the rebrand for the tech sector? I nodded slowly, remembering because it had been one of my proudest moments. A presentation I'd worked on for weeks that had apparently impressed the executive team. I was in the back of the room, he admitted, and you were brilliant, confident and creative and absolutely magnetic. And I realized halfway through that I was more interested in the woman presenting than the actual content. My brain was trying to process this new information while simultaneously freaking out about Monday. So you've been, what, lurking around company events hoping I'd notice you? When you put it like that, it sounds pathetic. It is pathetic, I said, but I was fighting a smile now because there was something absurdly charming about a billionaire CEO essentially admitting to having a crush. I'm a very powerful man, he said with mock dignity. I don't lurk. I strategically position myself. You lurked. I strategically positioned, he insisted, pulling me back down beside him despite my protests. And it worked because here you are in my bed looking absolutely beautiful while insulting me. I'm having a crisis, I protested weakly. And you're having a crisis in my arms, he corrected, which means I get to help you through it. I looked up at him, at the genuine affection in his expression mixed with amusement and something deeper. Everyone's going to know, I said quietly. Eventually, he agreed, but not because of Monday. That meeting is about quarterly results and strategic planning. You'll be one face in a crowd of hundreds, and I'm very good at maintaining professional composure. And after, we figure it out together, he said, his hand cupping my face. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. What? I'm not hiding this, he said firmly. I'm not hiding you. I won't make our relationship public until you're ready, but I'm also not going to pretend I don't want you. That last night didn't mean everything to me. My heart did something complicated in my chest. This is insane. Completely, he agreed. But I've spent 3 years being sensible and professional and lonely, and I'm done. I found you and I'm not letting go without a fight. I kissed him then because words felt inadequate, and because despite everything, despite the complications and the panic and the absolute chaos this was going to cause, I didn't want to let go either. We're going to have to be so careful, I murmured against his lips. The most careful, he agreed. No special treatment at work. None whatsoever. And if people find out, then they find out, he said, and we deal with it together. I pulled back to look at him properly. You really fell 6 months ago. He smiled, soft and genuine. Completely and catastrophically. That's pathetic. I know, he said cheerfully. You make me pathetic, and I've never been happier about anything in my life, and despite everything, I found myself laughing. Chapter 7. Something more.
I won't hide you, and the real question is, will you stay?
We spent the rest of Sunday in his penthouse, alternating between panic about Monday and pretending everything was completely normal. It wasn't working. Okay, I said for the 5th time that afternoon, pacing across his living room while he watched from the couch with barely concealed amusement. So I walk in, sit in the back, don't make eye contact, take notes like a normal employee. You could also just relax, he suggested. Relax? I repeated. You want me to relax when I'm about to see the man whose bed I woke up in this morning standing at a podium talking about quarterly earnings. When you put it like that, it does sound problematic. I shot him a look, and he held up his hands in surrender. I'm sorry, he said, though he was clearly fighting a smile. You're right. This is a very serious situation that requires serious planning. Don't mock me. I would never, he lied, standing up and crossing to where I'd stopped pacing. But Sarah, you need to trust me. I've been doing this for years. Maintaining professional boundaries while having a personal life. You just admitted you've been alone for years, I pointed out. Fair, he conceded. But theoretically, I know how it works. I groaned, dropping my head against his chest in defeat. But I'm going to get fired. You're not getting fired, he said, his arms coming around me automatically. You're excellent at your job. Your performance reviews are impeccable, and you've never once traded on any connection to me because until yesterday, you didn't know I existed. Your HR department is going to have a field day with this. HR works for me, he reminded me. And more importantly, we haven't violated any policies. You don't report to me. We're not in the same department. There's no conflict of interest, except that you're literally everyone's boss. Details, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I pulled back to look at him, at the face that had become dangerously familiar in less than 24 hours. How are you so calm about this? Because I've wanted this for months, he said simply. And now that I have it, I'm not going to let fear or policy or other people's opinions take it away from me. The certainty in his voice made something warm spread through my chest. And you're very confident for someone whose employee is currently having a breakdown in his living room. My girlfriend, he corrected. Not my employee. My girlfriend who happens to work for the same company I own, but in a completely different capacity with no direct reporting structure. I blinked. Girlfriend? He looked suddenly uncertain, like he'd revealed too much too fast. Is that too presumptuous? We can call it something else if... I kissed him, cutting off his rambling with the most effective method available. Girlfriend works, I murmured against his lips. His smile was brilliant. Good, he said, because I already mentally referred to you as that 6 times today, and it would be awkward to take it back. You're such a dork, I said affectionately. A very rich, powerful dork, he corrected. Still a dork. He pulled me closer, his hands settling on my waist in a way that was becoming dangerously familiar. A dork who's completely gone for you. My heart did something complicated, and I found myself studying his face, the sharp jawline and dark eyes and perfectly styled hair that had been thoroughly messed up by my hands earlier. He was unfairly attractive, the kind of attractive that should be illegal, and now that I'd touched him, now that I knew what he felt like and tasted like and sounded like, I was having trouble maintaining any kind of professional distance mentally. Stop looking at me like that, he said, his voice dropping to something lower. Like what? Like you're considering doing something that will make us both forget about Monday entirely. I bit my lip, trying to look innocent and failing spectacularly. I don't know what you mean, Sarah, he warned, though his hands tightened on my waist. Asher, I mimicked his tone. We should probably talk more about boundaries and expectations, he said, even as he pulled me closer. Probably, I agreed, walking my fingers up his chest. We should definitely have a serious conversation about professionalism and appropriate workplace behavior. Absolutely, he said, his eyes darkening. Very important topics. Critical even. So why are you looking at me like that? I gave up pretending to have any self-control and climbed into his lap, straddling him on the couch in a move that was probably not conducive to serious conversation. Because you're ridiculously hot, I admitted, and I've been trying to be responsible and professional and worried about Monday, but honestly, I just keep thinking about how unfair it is that you look like this. He laughed, surprised and delighted. That's your reasoning. Look at you. I gestured at his face. Look at your stupid perfect face and your stupid perfect everything, and tell me I'm supposed to sit across the room and have rational thoughts. My stupid perfect face? He repeated, clearly amused. Yes, I said firmly. It's distracting and inappropriate, and I'm filing a complaint with HR. I am HR, he reminded me. Then I'm filing a complaint with you about you. What's the complaint? That you're too attractive and it's affecting my ability to panic properly about Monday. He was full on laughing now, his head falling back against the couch. That's the worst complaint I've ever received. Well, get used to it, I said, because I have a feeling I'm going to be filing it frequently. He looked at me then, still smiling, but with something softer in his eyes. And I really like you, he said. I really like you too, I admitted, even though you're ruining my life. I prefer to think of it as improving your life. Debatable. He kissed me then, slow and thorough and absolutely devastating. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew Monday was going to be a disaster. But right now, sitting in his lap with his hands in my hair and his smile against my lips, I found I didn't care. Chapter 8. The Choice and Something More.
If the world is watching, let them see who I chose.
Monday arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train. I'd rehearsed my normal employee face in the mirror 17 times, practiced sitting in the back row without looking suspicious, and coached myself on appropriate professional reactions to seeing my boyfriend, God, that word still felt surreal, standing at a podium. What I hadn't prepared for was walking into the office and finding it in complete chaos. Did you hear? My coworker Jennifer grabbed my arm the moment I stepped off the elevator. Someone leaked photos from the gala, the CEO with some woman, and now the board is losing their minds. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my knees. Photos. Apparently he was dancing with someone, being all protective and possessive and completely unprofessional according to the email chain that's been circulating since 6 this morning. She was practically vibrating with excitement. The all hands is probably going to be a disaster. I heard 3 board members are demanding he address it. I made it to my desk on autopilot, my brain trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. Someone had photographed us, had captured whatever had been building between us at the gala, and now it was spreading through the company like wildfire. My phone buzzed. Asher, don't panic. Me, too late. Asher, trust me. I've got this. I wanted to believe him, but the knot in my stomach suggested otherwise. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for 9, and by 8:45, the main conference hall was packed with employees who clearly weren't there for quarterly earnings. I sat in the back like planned, trying to make myself invisible while conversations swirled around me. I heard she's from marketing. No way. Probably some socialite. Do you think he'll actually address it? At exactly 9, Asher walked onto the stage and the room fell silent. He looked every inch the powerful CEO, suit perfectly tailored, expression calm and controlled, and for a moment I saw what everyone else saw, the intimidating billionaire who built an empire from nothing. Then his eyes swept the crowd and landed on me for half a second, something soft flickering in his expression before the mask returned. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "I know many of you are here because you've seen photos circulating from a charity gala this weekend." The tension in the room ratcheted up immediately. "Some of you have questions about the woman I was photographed with," he continued. "And some of you, including several board members, have suggested I address this situation in a way that protects the company's reputation." My heart was hammering so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. "Here's what I'm going to say," Asher said, his tone shifting to something harder, something that brooked no argument. "I don't dance with women to impress ex-boyfriends or make power plays or engage in whatever narrative is being constructed. I dance with the woman I chose, and I'll continue choosing her regardless of who has opinions about it." The room erupted in whispers, and I felt every eye trying to find who he was talking about. "Her career, her reputation, and her privacy are protected by me personally," he continued. "Anyone who has a problem with my personal life is welcome to take it up with me directly. Anyone who attempts to impact her professional standing will find themselves unemployed. Is that clear?" Dead silence. "Good," he said. "Now let's talk about quarterly earnings." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Numbers and projections and strategic initiatives that I couldn't focus on because my brain was still processing what had just happened. He'd protected me, publicly and unequivocally, and probably torched several board relationships in the process. When the meeting ended, people filed out in clusters of gossip, but I stayed frozen in my seat until the room was almost empty. Asher appeared beside me so quietly I jumped. I started, then stopped because I didn't have words. "Necessary," he finished. "They needed to know that you're not a secret I'm ashamed of, or a scandal to be managed. You're someone I chose, and I don't apologize for that." "You just told off the entire company," I said, "and probably half the board." "They'll get over it," he said, then smiled. "Or they won't, and I'll replace them. I have that power, remember?" I laughed despite everything, shaky and slightly hysterical. "You're insane." "About you, yes," he agreed. "Come on, I'm taking you to lunch. Asher, everyone's going to see." "Good," he said, offering his hand. "Let them." And because I was apparently just as insane as he was, I took it. We walked through the building together, past staring employees and whispered conversations, past my department where Jennifer's jaw literally dropped, and past the executive floor where I'd never been allowed before. Where are we going?" I asked. "Lunch first," he said. "Then I'm introducing you properly to everyone who matters. Then we're going back to my place where you can file more complaints about my stupid perfect face." I stopped walking, pulling him to a halt in the middle of the corridor. "You know this changes everything," I said. "I know," he agreed. "And I don't care. I'm done hiding what I want, and I'm done letting other people dictate how I live my life. People are going to talk." "Let them," he said, pulling me closer. "I've spent 3 years being invisible and careful and lonely. I found you, and I'm not going back." Somewhere down the hall, I heard someone gasp as he kissed me, quick and possessive, and completely inappropriate for a corporate hallway. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Besides," he said, "your ex is apparently losing his mind on social media right now, and that alone makes this worthwhile." "Marcus?" I asked, surprised. "He posted something about gold diggers and corporate corruption," Asher said cheerfully. "My legal team is already drafting the cease and desist." I laughed, real and genuine and completely free. "You're going to be so much trouble," I said. "And the best kind," he agreed. "Now come on. I promised you lunch, and I have a reputation for keeping promises." As we walked out together into the sunlight, past employees and cameras and whatever chaos was waiting, I realized something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. Wasn't just another employee in another department. I was someone chosen, someone protected, someone worth risking everything for. And Asher wasn't hiding anymore. Wasn't pretending to be anything other than a man completely gone for someone. We'd figure out the rest, navigate the complications and the gossip and the board members who disapproved. But right now, walking hand in hand with the most powerful man in the building who'd just publicly claimed me in front of hundreds of people, I felt invincible. "You know," I said as we reached his car, "you never did tell me about those quarterly earnings." He pulled me against him, grinning. "Boring corporate stuff," he said. "I'd rather talk about how you're moving in with me." "I'm what, too soon?" he asked innocently. "Way too soon. Then how about dinner tonight?" "That I can do," I agreed. And as we drove away from Blackwell Industries, leaving chaos and gossip and a completely transformed future in our wake, I couldn't stop smiling. The end.